Good evening. It is 8 o'clock p.m. in Dallas, Texas. But if I am correct, it is about 8 a.m. in China. Hi, China. How are you doing today? I'm very sad we have not met more formally, more recently. I also want to acknowledge that prior to today, I had many things for you that I was really hoping to be able to extend and share with you in a very forthright manner. The first time I prepared something formally to present was by May 10th of 2019, which I understood would have been the 20th anniversary of a public notice regarding some satellite technology sharing arrangement that had been made between the United States and the People's Republic of China. I had a full package prepared. It could have been presented to you in the appropriate manner through the appropriate channels. And as a matter of fact, I had already arrived on site in February and through March of 2018. So it would have been an appropriate individual, let's put it that way, that could have officially made sure that that was attended to as necessary. Alas, the next time I had something to present to you was in connection with a spot check around what I had hoped to be a demonstration of a particular technological paradigm that also applied elements of legislation within the United States regarding specifically protection of the intellectual property of Americans in China. There were specific techniques and technologies available in order to assure that protocols had been put into place in order to to comply with the protocols outlined in those that particular report, but also with an understanding that there was a potential different cultural bearing that could have been applied in consideration specifically of the needs that would have been available or the needs that would have needed to be met in a context of understanding People's Republic of China insofar as I understood it at the time. Alas, that, as far as I understand, was not able to be conveyed to you or presented to you through an appropriate diplomatic channel. I apologize for that. The next time was in response to a presentation I had witnessed online from a major telecom company based out of China, presenting information specifically in consideration of how the rollout of 5G was connected to specific need for clarification on the appropriate standards that were going to provide the basis for consideration of compliance and successful, shall we say, utilization of the 5G network relative to 4G and 3G and other incipient networks up until that time. I found it to be very helpful and very informative, and I actually came up with a very comprehensive response to that 1 hour's worth of online content that was provided through translation that I found to be very sufficient at the time, which was in May of 2020. Alas, I have not been able to officially present that information to you. On the other hand, I have also come up with what I understand to be a transportation policy recommendation regarding transatlantic or transoceanic transit and how that may or may not be connected to the realities in China relative to the realities in the United States regarding prior commitments around the Megaport project. This is something that has been in development for several years and is still ongoing at this time. However, alas, I've not been able to provide that to you through any sort of verifiable diplomatic channel. My understanding, however, is that although there may be other matters concerning public health, including public health from a perspective of emergency prevention or preparedness, that could have also been a part of any sort of official communications I had with the People's Republic of China, that what's most of interest is mental health, specifically my mental health. And for that reason, I'm going to say I waive any sort of consideration of past mental health treatment as somehow being considered to be confidential, especially insofar as I'm on the record of saying that my understanding of the recording and the consideration of, as well as the specifics connected to treatment versus billing, have had errors, including errors that I believe are evidence that could be and should be presented as part of a criminal proceeding. that I am not going to invoke any sort of patient confidentiality in regards to those specifics. And if there is any disputation, and you should have access to that information for any manner, way, shape, or form, including in connection with the biomed sector or as part of a potential derivative application, including in consideration of outstanding or other commitments you might have with your partners or affiliates, as I understand and have known about at least since beginning of 2020, then I acknowledge that I am cognizant of that and the potential implications, and am more than willing to engage in a formal process to reconcile that if necessary. However, what I do have is a self evaluation that I performed in accordance with what I understand might be a more appropriate authentication of the psychological status of me as somebody who might be put into consideration from particular mental health modalities. What I did is I did a spot check one night. The specific day of reference was on June 17th of 2019. And just so you know, this was a month before I ended up providing substantial public comments through various public comment periods for the federal government of the United States. So far as I know, none of that would be classified or considered to be sensitive intelligence related information. And so far as I know, none of it directly refers to the People's Republic of China or any outstanding obligations associated with the People's Republic of China. But it's important to understand these time frames, that a month before that occurred, which I also understand was in connection to other activities going on within the federal government system, that I did this particular spot check of my own psychological analysis. And what I did is I watched clips from an old movie that I contend was actually used in considerations of integrating culture and the expression of culture through the media in terms of defining people's perceptions of reality, and how I believe that memes and other sorts of cultural reference points from this specific movie have had a very profound impact on a group psychology, specifically in connection with particular sectors of the American population, and have been used in connection not only with later media representations of American culture, including American culture from a particularly kind of controversial perspective, but also in consideration of a form of portending connected to programs that at various times were classified but have also been presented in public hearings through Congress in consideration of implications, including the long term ramifications therein. The movie was called The Manchurian Candidate, and this was the original version of that movie, not the more contemporary representation of the subject matter, which I understand now has a different demographic experience reflected in that movie specifically, that is distinct and determinately different for a variety of implications from the original version. There were a number of clips, each of which that had their own particular title, that was presented for a specific period of time. And what I did is I recorded my initial reflections upon watching these clips. I had not watched this movie previously. I had no prior context or no prior experience with this movie specifically, outside of verbal references that I may have heard about, or maybe reference within some other context. But I had never watched it before, and to this day I've not watched it all the way through. I only saw select excerpts, and I went through a kind of, I guess you could call, stochastic model in terms of selection, wherein I saw a variety of selections that were presented, and then depending upon how the description of that particular clip ended up impacting my primary identification reference point, I then selected that clip in that particular sequence in order to watch it. And what I did is I watched it, and then while I was watching it, I made notes, and then I paused afterwards in order to finish the reflection. I did keep track of the time, and I did specifically align this in what would be considered a formal report. And at a certain point in time, I did have need to reference this in consideration of a contact I made to a variety of entities located within the United States. And by the way, oh my, to be honest with you, actually the report was finished on the 19th. It actually started sooner. So just so you know, the reference points were the first scene, was Ladies' Garden Club scene. Perhaps you have a reference for that. The second one, Marco's Nightmare scene. The third one, Melvin's Nightmare scene. The fourth one, the Red Queen scene. The fifth one, meeting Rose on the train scene. Then, killing Senator Jordan and Josie scene. Then, 52 Red Queens say it's over scene. And then, I wanted a killer scene. Then, Marco fights Chun-Jin scene. Then, Rose picks up Marco scene. Then, a Cold War scene. And then finally, assassination scene. So all of these were actually addressed, and to be honest, I apologize. I did not actually finish this at that time. I did something else on June 17th, 2019. Silly me, I have this in the wrong order. I actually finished this on October 1st of 2019, which would be the first day of the fiscal year, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. But apparently it had been laid down, or rather outlaid, by June 17th of 2019. Does that clear things up? So apparently there was some sort of indication I had that something was being, shall we say, appropriated? And then by October 1st of 2019, I did my psychological evaluation, my self-psychological evaluation. Now, I have no problem presenting my actual notes in their rough form and in a specific format that I actually ended up doing my report in to you, either online or in a personal one-on-one. I would prefer you have at least two people present, just in case there's any questions. But you should know that it has been successfully completed. And if you're wondering, the reference points that actually were part of the outlay are the ABCs of communism, which was my initial review of a essay by someone who, by the way, is not from the People's Republic of China, but did, shall we say, inspire a particular kind of consideration. And in response to that specific kind of consideration, I ended up finishing my Manchurian Candidate psychological profile, right? Psychological evaluation. Does that answer your questions? Did I qualify? Did I qualify? I mean, I think somebody would say that insofar as there was a particular kind of payment, right, that was required in order to confirm that I had followed through on my treatment, specifically in reference to that last scene, and that would have been considered my compliance with my prescription. I may not have actually paid that one, right? I didn't pay that bill. I did not pay that bill. I did not pay that last bill. I did all that other stuff, right? And that would have been something I would have offered and would have hoped would be considered a, acceptable fulfillment of any obligations. But that's never been able to be successfully presented in a formal and verifiable manner. If this is what you really need, I have it here. I'm not gonna lie. I have nothing to hide. You need to be honest about these things. And it's important to be able to go through what's happened in your past, even if it seems very disturbing. There's none of this, as far as I'm concerned, need to stabilize for 10, 15, 20 years. So don't actually talk about the trauma. Let's just talk about weight, blood pressure. Have you been ingesting any drugs? Have you engaged in sexual activity? Did you make it to work? Stabilizing. If you need to go through my actual past psychology to determine whether or not I might still be eligible for another job besides this specific candidacy, you can feel free to let me know it anytime. Have a good day. Enjoy your conference in Ukraine.